The political would accept Rudd, Howard. They understand that these people have lived experience. The national primacy, yeah, of course, absolutely essential for morale. No, why wouldn't you? At a wake, when you're about to being downrange and you're killing for your country, but you can't have a couple of beers because the generals couldn't work out how to explain that the martial requirements are like this, and we must protect those. We're going to take a bit of risk with our reputation. It could be a few incidents, but we'll wear that. Is that okay, Prime Minister? You go, of course it is. But they didn't have the guts to say that because they weren't grown up in a culture of that. And then when they came to it, they didn't have the moral courage to do their job and represent their men and their women's interests and say, this is really important and push the point. But we didn't see that happen, and we know why. Because senior leaders chose to hand wave it and give what the minister wanted to hear. Cheerleading advice. So yeah, right. That's my read back, mate. It shows just how poor the leadership was. And if they can't do it about drinking, what else? Partner force, credibility and legal action. Yeah. So hopefully that just, you're right, mate. And it just shows how gutless our senior leaders were in the ADF, that they couldn't own that shit and say, we're doing this, not asking permission. They asked the minister, like, you sent us to war, this is how we're doing it. Take note, we're going to crack on. You got a problem with it, dry your eyes. And the police wouldn't have had it. They wouldn't have had. But you got from the Smith and the Skype and all this sneering woke Canberra risk model that the army officers had grown up in, they took that to Afghanistan because that's their lived experience, and they thought that's how you run a war. And the SAS going, SOTG going, no, the bullshit. So you sort of circle right back. That's what happened, mate. And you have this clash of micro cultures because you got warfighters and you got bureaucrats. And heroes hate narcissists hate heroes, mate. And we know the narcissist in the room, and they hate the hero.
How many of our senior officers have combat experience? From your, I know you can't, it's hard to extrapolate, but just based on the patterns.
Very few, generationally. And this cohort, in my lived experience, they didn't have any. But the good leaders didn't need to have combat experience. You've got trust, you've got authenticity, and you're professionally competent, and you learn through experience. Shit, you don't know. And you grow up in the culture. So it's not easy. I think that's a bit of a get out of jail for them. No, they didn't grow up in a warrior martial warfighting culture that prioritised their men and their capability over their ass covering. They grew up in this bureaucratic Canberra culture, and they mimicked what they saw. Go back to the Royal Commission, why you promote people, who gets to be in key appointments. We had a CDF and a Chief Army who didn't serve as a one-staff. Went over to Prime Minister and Cabinet, came back. That's just, I've talked, how do you supplant martial warfighting experience with bureaucratic Barton buffoonery? You can't, but they think it's the same. And we then had the minister of that CDF, Linda Reynolds. I'm just talking about Linda Reynolds as a minister. So, you've got people who weren't prepared, who didn't do their job, and we suffered from that in my view. We being the soldiers got betrayed because you had this endemic bureaucratic cowardice fracturing and infecting the martial warfighting leadership of the ADF.
Well, dare I say that is the culture, again, to use that
culture,
term.
Absolutely. Royal Commission said it, Oversight Committee report said it, and Dan Fortune, DSC and Bar were 3 tours, and probably the most experienced Special Forces combat officer from Afghanistan. How the hell did I get that title? But I'll own it to push back at the woke wankery that came out of Canberra.